It is 4 p.m. on Monday, August 11th, 2025, and I will call this City Council study session to order. There's no one in the audience, so we'll move forward with thanking them. And then if Councilmember White would lead us in the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then just want to note for the record, it looks like Councilmember Strader is absent this evening, and then all other council members are present. And then for staff, we have Director Madden, Interim Director Robeck, Chief Hernandez, Planning Manager Stallnecker, and Planning Manager Stallnecker is the acting city clerk this evening. So it is 4:01. And the City Council will now go into an executive session per RCW 42.30.1101II to discuss litigation that the agency reasonably believes may be committed by or against the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in an official capacity. Want to note that legal will have legal representation joining us virtually in this meeting, and I suspect that the council executive session will last till 20 p.m. and is not expected to take further action following this session. Okay. The city council is extending the executive session until 4:45 PM. Okay. Okay. The executive session is concluded and adjourned at 4:45 PM, and I call our study session back to order. Council, we have 4 items this evening. The first one is on page 3 of your packet. It is a second quarter financial report, so I will turn the floor over to Interim Director Robeck.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We'll be presenting the second quarter report fund by fund as usual, but please let me know if you have any questions or need any additional information as we go along. The baseline for activity in the operating funds is 50% of budgeted amounts, and we'll be addressing any significant variances from this target as the funds are presented. So starting with the general fund on page 5, general fund revenues look great at 63%, with all revenue categories above the 50% target. General fund expenditures look good as well at 48.8%. Judicial expenditures are higher than budget due to the annual payment to the City of Puyallup for municipal court services being billed and paid earlier than in previous years. A portion of these expenditures will be allocated to the new automated traffic safety camera fund as well, so this amount will decrease prior to the next quarterly report. Other admin and personnel is higher than budget as a result of higher than expected unemployment claims. Facilities is a negative amount due to the indirect cost allocation, but this will likely change to a positive amount as the year progresses. Other central services is higher due to annual expenditures, including insurance, memberships, and dues. As a result, this category should not increase much more during the year. Lastly, non-expenditures is higher than budget, primarily due to timing issues. This category contains several clearing accounts with expenditures distributed throughout the year. Does anyone have any questions on anything in the general fund?
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Could you get a little bit more specific on what the non-revenues are, being that it's at 173.9%?
Yes, non-revenues, actually, I have it pulled up here. I can. Thank you for the question. Non-revenues include facility rental deposits, and there is a miscellaneous utility fee for duplicate billing that does get allocated out among the funds. That entry will be made prior to the next quarterly report,
Okay.
So that amount will reduce by the next quarterly
Okay.
report.
No, not that it bothered me. I just was wondering, because it's an awfully large percentage, and being that it says non-revenues, okay, that's a broad category.
Yeah, because those facility rental deposits, we generally refund those to the renters. That's the refund you'll see in an expenditure category. So that's why they're considered non-revenues,
Oh,
basically.
okay.
And the other item will be allocated to the utility funds. So that's part of the
All right.
reason it's
Thank
has
you.
that title as well. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the Asset Replacement and Capital Reserve Fund on page 6. Revenues in this fund look good at 52.5%. Expenditures in the fund include the purchase of 2 police vehicles. On the street fund on page 7, the street fund looks good with revenues at 49.4% and expenditures at 39.6%. Revenues are slightly below budget, primarily due to slightly lower than expected expenses. The next fund, the rainy day fund on page 8, there is not much activity in this fund. Revenues are slightly higher than budget at 53.2% and include interest and budgeted transfers in from the general fund. Next on page 9, the drug seizure fund. There's not much activity in this fund, so I have no comments. The criminal justice fund on page 110. Just 10, not 110. The Criminal Justice Fund looks good with revenues at 49.9% and expenditures at 45.5%. Dispatch services are slightly higher than budget at 52% as a result of the actual annual assessment coming in higher than the budget estimate. Animal control services are higher than budget at 56.9% due to the annual previous year true-up payment to the City of Sumner for Metro Animal Services. Any questions on the Criminal Justice Fund? Okay. The Community Events Fund on page 11, there's not much activity in that fund yet, so I have no comments. The new Automated Traffic Safety Camera Fund on page 12, there is not much activity in this fund, but this program will be active soon, and we will be allocating a portion of the judicial expenditures currently accounted for in the general fund to this fund prior to the next quarterly report. The real estate excise tax funds on page 13 and 14, revenues in the REIT funds are currently below budget at 36.9%, but tax revenues are increasing and have grown to about $94,000 to date for each of the funds. The Traffic Impact Fee Fund on page 15. This fund looks good, with revenues already surpassing annual budget amounts due to a few large development payments. The Parks Impact Fee Fund on page 16. The revenues in this fund are currently lower than budget at 40.1%, but revenues have grown to about $22,000 to date, surpassing the budgeted amount. Next up is the Capital Improvement Fund on page 17. The Capital Improvement Fund looks good with nearly $2.4 million in TIB grant revenues received for the SR 99 Porterway project. Larger expenditures in the fund to date include expenditures for the SR 99 Porterway intersection improvements project and the Community Park outdoor meeting venue project. The Electric Utility Fund on page 18. This fund looks good with revenues at 54.9% and expenditures at 40%. You will notice that interfund transfers are slightly higher than budget at 56.1%, and that's due to higher electric sales. Next up is the Electric Capital Improvement Fund on page 19. There's currently not much activity in this fund, but the largest expenditures to date are for tree trimming and the pole replacement project. The Water Capital Improvement or Water Utility Fund on page 20 looks good with revenues at 49.6% and expenditures at 36.1%. Revenues are slightly below budget, but still exceeding revenues for the previous year. The Water Capital Improvement Fund on page 21. Revenues in this fund look good with higher than anticipated capital contributions or system development charges. The largest expenditures to date are for the new deep well and Porterway water main improvements projects. Yes.
Do you know about how much more cost there is going to be to the deep well project?
Ooh, that's a good question.
We have some general estimates, but we won't know until we go out to bid.
Okay, I mean, do you have a ballpark?
No.
Or would you rather not do that?
Yes, I'd rather not, yeah.
I'd rather suck you into that, though. But you don't have a,
Don't have a ballpark.
okay. I wish you did.
Next up is the Water Asset Replacement Fund on page 22. There's currently not much activity in this fund, so I have no comments. In the Stormwater Utility Fund on page 23, this fund looks good with revenues at 55.1% and expenditures at 37%. This fund also, you'll notice that interfund transfers are slightly higher than budget at 56.5%, and that's due to higher storm drainage fee revenues. The Stormwater Capital Improvement Fund on page 24. Currently, there's not much activity in this fund. Expenditures to date are for the citywide ditch and culvert project and invasive plant species removal projects. There's currently not much activity in the Stormwater Asset Replacement Fund on page 25, so I have no comments. The Electric Asset Replacement Fund on page 26 looks good with revenues at 56.4%, and expenditures include the purchase of a new transformer. The Vehicle Repair and Maintenance Fund on page 27. This fund looks good with expenditures below budget at 37.2%. Revenues in this fund are based on internal work orders and will catch up to expenditures as the year progresses. And lastly is the Information Technology Fund on page 28. Expenditures in this fund are slightly above budget at 51.4%. This is primarily due to equipment purchases and annual payments for renewals of licenses and subscriptions. Revenues in this fund are based on cost allocations and posted to the fund in equal amounts each month. Does anyone have any questions on any of the funds? Comments?
Okay. Councilmember Whalen?
On the electric, but it's going to not be your answer that I'm looking for. Dustin, any movement on support for our substation and our move and our agreement potentially with Puget Sound Energy as opposed to Tacoma Energy for backup supply in the city? Is there any movement that you would like to share with us?
I would like to hold off until we do the rate review for the electric utility, at which point we are having conversations with both PSC and TPU, and we're at Bonneville's facilitating some of those conversations. So there is movement, but nothing concrete.
This is a sad question to ask. What's your vision in the future? It's going to be more expensive, is it not? With the changes in who we're partnering with or have subsidiary support from and so forth?
I think overall rates in the electric utility, not just Milton, but in general, are going to be going up in the near future.
I want to dull the impact, and just knowing that it's going to cost more, and how much is you can tell us a little bit later, but I see that as something that's going to affect the general public in a less than favorable way, but an understanding way if we gently bring it out to the general public.
Right. The analysis that's happening right now, which will be presented to council in September, will show the projections of rates moving into the next 10 years. And they are not as steep as maybe some of our surrounding communities.
Well, that's a good piece of news.
Yes.
You can expand the font on that one.
Yes, I will.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Just to expand on that. So in relation, to the substation, so we're going to have to go through a similar process that we did before to be able to fund the substation or even to retrofit it I know that we're in negotiations, I understand that, but how is that going to affect, or if you can't answer it now, just keep that in mind, how will that affect, to have the monies to be able to make that happen, the substation that is.
Yes, we will expand on that in September.
Okay, because I've been wondering for, where this is going, what the update will be. And because I was at the beginning, and so I'd like to see it come to fruition and put that baby to bed.
Understood.
Any other questions? Okay. So our next item this evening is on page 29 of the packet. It is the first read of ordinance 2119-25, which is amending chapter 2.32 of the Milton Municipal Code. And I will turn the floor over to Chief Hernandez.
Good evening, council. This is a housekeeping issue, adding the assistant chief position to Milton Municipal Code 232. And if you look on page 31, and you look at 4 sentence down, and the sentence just above it, excluding the police chief who was found, but we're adding and the assistant police chief. So that's the addition to the code. And it's, civil service recognizes that this is an appointed position and not a civil service position. That way, when it comes to collective bargaining, we don't get into an issue of the accusation that somehow the assistant chief is doing collective bargaining work, because it's recognized as an exempt position. So this item is just for discussion tonight, if you should choose to discuss it. Otherwise, we will bring it back and make the final code change.
Any questions on this ordinance? All right, pretty straightforward, thank you. Next item is on page 33 of our packet. It is another first read of an ordinance, ordinance 2120-25, amending chapter 5.04 of the Milton Municipal Code regarding business licenses. And I'll turn the floor over to Interim Director Robeck and Planning Manager Stalnecker.
Thank you. Chapter 35.90 RCW requires that all cities and towns with general business licensing requirements adopt a uniform model ordinance establishing a minimum dollar threshold below which businesses that engage in business within the city but are not physically located within the city must be partially or fully exempted from licensing requirements. This threshold for out-of-city businesses was recently increased from 2,000 to 4,000 in the Uniform Model Ordinance, requiring Milton Municipal Code to be updated as well. The complete list of the changes regarding out-of-city businesses and the threshold is included in Exhibit A, the City Business License Model Ordinance. In addition to making these required updates, staff is also proposing changes to MMC Chapter 5.04 to enhance enforcement of business license regulations in the city. The addition of Section 5.04.075, Inspections Right of Entry, is recommended to improve the city's ability to inspect licensed business areas, and the amendment to Section 5.04.220, Criminal Penalty, is proposed to provide a penalty alternative to a misdemeanor for violations of business license standards.
Any questions, comments? Councilmember Cedar?
I'm curious where this came from, particularly the right of entry idea. It seems incredibly broad to say that every business with a business license can be entered with a pretty minimal procedural protection in place. How did this get generated?
So this section and then the section that will be item D have somewhat come out of conversations that Code Compliance and the police department have had with specifically Lakewood and some other jurisdictions, looking at things like some of our massage establishments, where when talking to these other jurisdictions, they were talking about that having the ability to, specifically the ability to write tickets instead of doing it criminal, has been very useful for them when they're dealing with places that are not, who are using it to cover other stuff. The inspection right of entry, I believe I borrowed from Lakewood's as well. I am meeting with the attorney later this week to go over this section and number D to see how that affects current businesses that are already licensed. Do they grandfather in, that kind of stuff? If you have specific concerns about this particular language, I'd happy to have those conversations with him as well.
Sure, yeah, I can point out some specific concerns. So I have specific concerns that this states that the city may designate appropriate other agencies to undertake inspections. And the inspection right is incredibly broad, as I kind of stated, that, yeah, it's premised on the right to inspect for business license purposes, but that could be anything. So for instance, if we have a citizen in our community who, let's say, is an undocumented immigrant, or I don't know, has a warrant somewhere, this could definitely be used as a pretext by federal agents, by county sheriff. I 100% value our police, and I don't expect that they would ever infringe on constitutional rights, but it opens the door for that kind of abuse. And
I hear
so,
what you're saying, so I will look at tightening. I may have unintentionally made it broader than I intended, thinking staff and specific things tied to the city, and then like health department. So
Yeah.
I may need to list those specifically, might be.
yeah,
clarifying.
I hear what you're saying regarding the next thing that we're going to talk about on our agenda with regard to illicit activities behind closed doors in dark rooms of some businesses. I get that. That's a big concern. What I don't want is like canon to just have to be walked into, and like when the only protections are reasonable steps. That's really open to legal interpretation, and I don't support it in this broad of a context.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Okay. Do you have all the notes you need from Councilmember Cedar? Okay. Moving on to our next item this evening, it is on page 41 of your packet. It is another first read. It's ordinance 2121-25, adding a chapter 5.10 regarding massage practitioners. So I'm going to turn the floor over to our planning manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, this is sort of a second section that has to do with us trying to tighten up what's allowed and not allowed when it comes to massage practitioners. Obviously, it's for many people, it's a valid medical procedure that helps. It unfortunately is oftentimes used to cover up other activities. And so again, looking at Fifes and Lakewoods in a couple jurisdictions, I've sort of pulled language to give a little more licensing restrictions. In essence, it would say that if you are running a massage business, that they have to be licensed with the state practitioners. They have to be 18. It has some specific standards of operation that deal with lighting, access, the age, no drugs, alcohol, that kind of stuff. So this is here for first reading and review. As I previously stated, this isn't intended to come back until September, and so I am gonna, I had sent it to the attorney. We hadn't a chance to connect, so we'll connect this week and go over both making sure that what's here makes sense, as well as how does this affect any existing businesses we have. And so hopefully that will give us just another tool to ensure that we're creating safe space for everybody. So, thank you.
Any questions, comments? Councilmember Cedar?
I'd love to hear the law enforcement perspective on this and what kind of problems we've had from the businesses we have in Milton. I know there's, I think maybe at least a couple up the hill. I don't know if there's something on 99 as well. But have you run into any issues?
Yes. And they've been issues for years. And we've been working with the prosecutor's office and the city of Lakewood, who's been relatively successful on shutting down these clandestine operations. And so this is a culmination of meeting with all of those people for the last several months, trying to figure out how we can shut these illicit businesses down. We know that they're there, and again, it's problematic, so we're trying to take the most effective way to be able to do that.
I appreciate that. And just to kind of balance some of what I've said previously, I like this, how it's targeted to one specific thing. I like that this gives us a tool to use kind of the business side of it to target these institutions, which obviously we don't want in Milton. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, in illicit, we don't want the illicit part. We want upstanding citizens and businesses.
This really is about giving us local control to be able to regulate illicit businesses, rather than, we've asked the feds in the past, but, so this is more about us being able to control what goes on in the businesses.
It feels very similar. I wasn't on council at the time, but like the dispensary conversation that occurred and ensuring we got code in that kept that specific business out of Milton, but it's not what the citizens wanted. This to me feels in that same vein. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing it up.
Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for this, Tony. This is something we don't have strictly within our code today. This is something that I've looked at a little bit and so forth, and I've seen cities that have had issues with not being prepared to receive and to manage these types of potentially businesses and so forth. Glad to see it in the paperwork, and thank you for your efforts.
Any other comments, questions? So, our Planning Manager Stalnecker, I just want to thank you for your work on this. I know that Chief and I have had this discussion over the last 8 years, and you're the first person that's been able to help us get this, a solution in place as long as council passes it. So thank you. Okay, wonderful. All right, well, that's our study session this evening. And so, Councilmember Whalen?
I just have one other question, if you don't mind, or
Okay.
along Enchanted Parkway, closer to Wild Waves and so forth, King County is doing a significant amount of lane closures, both directions. It has to do with the water system modification and changes and so forth. I haven't seen anything from the city yet published, like in Milton Connections or whatever. I know we're a little bit weak on that side right now, not
Okay.
a criticism, but that's going to have a later in the evening impact on quite a few folks and so forth. I know there's material out there. Can we just borrow it and reproduce it and so forth so that we've covered our responsibility to try to advise the public? Because it's, they're going to have north and southbound lanes closed for several hours in the evenings.
Councilmember Wynn, I'll make sure we get something out. It's just, this is a study session, so we can't add discussion onto the agenda. So I hear what you're saying. I will look for some material to get out there.
And that's why I mentioned it, not
Okay.
to have a discussion on it, just to
Yeah,
mention.
no, for sure. All right, so seeing that all of our items have been concluded